fundamentally, we believe that sales is not about coercion. It is about finding good fit.
You almost always want to start with the technical details because they are the thing that is most interesting to you.
The shift is, what is the outcome and the emotion that your persona, that your customer, your investor is seeking?
Welcome to another episode of the BYU Tech Transfer Podcast. Today, my guest, John Linford, most recently with Deckability. He's got an interesting past, so I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself and what led him to this point in his career and what Deckability is specifically.
Well, it's great to be here, first of all. It's a varied past, not a checkered past.
Not checkered. Sorry, if I said checkered, that's not what he meant. Varied.
Varied. It's a varied past. But I actually graduated from BYU. I studied statistics, which is hilarious for what I'm doing now. Yeah. But I did start my career in data. But I was always interested in taking data into strategy. And so somehow ended up on an internship working for a pitch deck creation firm. And it really sparked my love of storytelling and of decks in general. And I took that into working for a venture capital firm, into 2 different startups, helped run an incubator here at BYU.
Very nice.
All that led me to then, start Deckability.
Nice. And how did Deckability get started specifically? And what is Deckability for somebody who's hearing that company name for the first time?
So Deckability is fundamentally a brand storytelling firm.
Okay.
We help companies articulate who they are better so that they can get money from investors, they can get more customers, they can get better partnerships. And our medium is through decks. Okay. So we build pitch decks, sales decks, not patios. It's always worth. I say decks, and there are enough people that go, so talk to me about wood varnish.
I think you're in construction. You're like, no, different kind of deck.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty much every time, actually. In fact, in my LinkedIn bio, it says, I build decks, sales and pitches, not patios, because of how often. Yeah. And I have a couple friends who just love trolling me, like, hey, like, what kind of wood are you using this week? Anyway.
Well, and it is one of those industry-specific words that if you're in venture capital or fundraising or any of those places, like, you know exactly what people mean when you say deck. And if you're not, you immediately go to a wooden deck. Yeah.
So it's worth clarifying. So how we got started, Silicon Slopes in 2023, I was on a men's mental health cold-plunge hike. Okay. And my co-founder had flown in from Tennessee through a bunch of different events, and I happened to be...
And you guys didn't know each other
at all. I'm sure we had seen each other around on LinkedIn at some point because both of us are pretty active there. Mm-hmm. But I ended up behind him on the trail and just hearing him yapping about, I help start these companies, I help all these different entrepreneurs. I'm like, seems like a cool guy. Yeah. And so we ended up on a call, I think 3 weeks later. And a week after that, he had an old friend reach out to him and said, hey, I've got this guy who's trying to raise money. Could you help him build a deck? Yeah. And he's like, hey, John, remember we talked about decks? Oh, and this is important information. During the call, that initial call with me and James, he goes, you have this ability to make decks. I have this ability to make decks. We've got this Deckability.
There you go.
Wow, that's good. Someone should write that down. But literally a month after we first met, we were in business together, me and James, and then he grabbed Cole, who's our third. They've known each other for about a decade. Right. I was the one that took a chance on, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and talk a little bit about that, because we have founders come into tech transfer all the time, and they have, I don't know what you would call it, but maybe a little bit of anxiety on finding a co-founder to work with. And, a month from introduction to founding the company, that's pretty quick. It seems like things are going well.
It's pretty unwise.
It might be unwise, but I mean, like, from your perspective, like, what advice would you give to a new entrepreneur who needs somebody to collaborate with, looking to find that right fit?
Well, the first thing I would say is find a co-founder, because you can't do everything. You don't want to do everything. Mm-hmm. A framework I'll often talk to young entrepreneurs about is called the 6 Types of Working Genius. Okay. So this is Pat Lencioni. It's the same guy who does 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, 4 Obsessions of a Great Executive. One of his least known works, but I think his best, is 6 Types of Working Genius. And the idea is that throughout the course of a project, you have 6 stages, and at every stage you have a type of genius that is required. And so of the 6, you have 2 working geniuses, you have 2 working competencies, and 2 working frustrations. Okay. Genius types, so things that give you energy. Your competencies, you can do them, but you don't necessarily enjoy it. And frustrations are obviously the grind your gears are not great. Right. And so
the things you would avoid.
Yes. And so you have 2, which means that there are 4 others that are kind of meh or terrible for you, which means you almost automatically need to have a co-founder. So that's just like, I always just say that of, Solo founding is cool, especially in the age of AI and vibe coding and all that.
Right.
But just having people who have different skill sets and a different way of thinking about the world, amazing. In terms of finding that person, I got lucky. And so what I would say is follow frameworks of 6 types of working genius, that if you can find complementary skill sets. So for instance, my working genius types are discernment and tenacity.
Okay.
So I'm really good at the, hey, this idea is good, this idea is bad. And I'm really good at the, hey, let's get this over the finish line, the detail work.
We just got to grind through this and get it done. Yeah.
James is wonder and galvanizing are his two, is what they're called. So he's really good at the how might we do this thing, the kind of brainstorming.
Yeah.
And then the, okay, team, let's go. We've got an idea. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
I hate those things. I hate those things.
Right.
So I actually love using that framework for finding a co-founder of find genius types that complement your own. I would say the same for broader of just skill sets. This one kind of goes without saying. If you're a technical co-founder, find someone who can do sales and vice versa. I think
and that can be a little challenging because we see a lot of, technical leads maybe come in wanting to start a company, and then they've got a buddy who is also a technical lead with more or less the same skills that they have. And it seems like that may not be the best fit as far as co-founding, right? Maybe they'd be your first employee, but maybe not as a co-founder because they don't have that complementary skill set that you're talking about here.
And maybe just a caution there of as you are a certain type of co-founder, be very cautious about how you value. And what I mean by that specifically is very often someone who's in sales has a hard time valuing technical and vice versa.
Right.
It's natural because it's the world that we live in. I happen to straddle both. Like that's my skill set is I literally stand in between.
Right. So you can see the value that both
I can see the value in both, but that's not common. And so I think just a piece of advice I always give to entrepreneurs is there's a reason why it exists. Even if you don't understand sales, you should still value someone who has that skill set and vice versa. Just because you can't code, just because you can't design or build doesn't mean that it's not valuable. You're not it.
Yeah. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time, right? Of just like going through it to really be able to understand that, okay, that's a skill that is different and it has value, even though it's not something that I'm interested in or necessarily see the value intrinsically.
Absolutely.
Okay, nice. Well, bringing it back to Deckability a little bit, and specifically, I heard you speak at iHub a few months ago at this point.
2 or 3 months
It's been a little while, but one of your main talking points there was bringing story into the deck build. So can you talk a little bit more about story's role in kind of an entrepreneurial journey, and specifically when it comes to pitching your idea to others?
Oh, yeah. I can talk about this for a long time.
Perfect.
So here's where founders get frustrated is they will go to an investor and the investors will say, you're missing this slide. This is out of order. I wanted this piece of information. I expected it in this format. And they go, okay, cool. And they go fix that.
Right.
And they either take it back or go to a different investor and they say something completely different. I hear this from almost every single founder I've ever talked to who's gone through the raising process. But even to the case of going and finding customers or going and finding partners, everyone seems to want something different.
Yeah.
And here's what I tell them. And this is what I've seen helping. At this point, we've helped people raise, partner, or sell over $100 million.
Yeah.
It's like this stuff works. The base truth is that people don't buy products, they purchase outcomes. And absolutely nobody buys, invests, partners, whatever. Nobody buys based off of logic. Everyone does it based off of emotion, which they then justify with logic. And so when it comes to building a deck and building a story, it has to be emotional first. And this is really counterintuitive, especially in the world of business. And I think especially for highly technical founders or technical products, where you don't really expect, you want to be able to just go feature first. You want to talk about the cool things that you're doing or why you're better than your competition. The truth is, nobody cares. Absolutely nobody cares about you. They don't care about your product. They don't care about why you're better. What they care about is the outcome to them.
Yes.
And the outcome to them is always emotional. If you're talking to a CEO, they're up at night worried about the bottom line and being able to pay all their employees. They're worried about payroll. They're worried about the next raise. They're worried about creating market traction. They don't care how it's done. They actually are kind of agnostic to that. Yeah. What they care about is outcome. And so what we do is we help companies. We come in and we really act as corporate therapists in a lot of ways, where we are sitting with them and saying, who are you? Like what's your vibe? What's your brand in terms of voice, messaging, tone, and especially what outcome are you trying to create in your persona?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can hit at that, then after that, the investor or the customer is like, okay, cool, tell me more. How does it work? How much does it cost? When can we implement it?
Then you get into those details that you originally thought were important.
Exactly.
Yes.
Once the emotional hook is set, everything else is totally fine, which is always why we focus on the first 4 slides. Everything after that really ends up being gravy.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that is, you hit the nail on the head when you said counterintuitive, because from a technical background, like I've got a technical background, I've got a master's in mechanical engineering, you almost always want to start with the technical details because they are the thing that is most interesting to you, right? The way that you solved the problem is more interesting than the outcome almost, right? But it's great to hear very clearly said that nobody cares about that, at least not initially, right? It's that initial hook that you need to have.
Well, digging in on that just a little bit, that is fundamentally still emotional. Like for founders, the reason why they want to talk about features so badly is because they have poured their heart and their soul and everything into X, Y, and Z, into the speed, into the efficiency, into whatever. And so it makes sense why that's the thing that they move towards.
It's that's their emotional hook, right? They want to share their emotional hook with others. Yeah.
And so the shift is, what is the outcome and the emotion that your persona, that your customer, your investor is seeking? If you can match that and meet that, you're going to be able to talk about features all day.
Yeah. Now, generally give kind of the overarching structure that you want to have for that initial story, because you said the first 4 slides are the most important. And I assume that that's kind of the very mini arc of the story that you're trying to tell. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
correct.
Kind of walk us through, again, maybe not too deep, but at a high level, what that might look like.
We call it brand articulation. So when I say brand, a lot of people are thinking logo mark, they're thinking colors. Brand is, we call brand the conductor of the orchestra. It's the thing that orchestrates your product, your sales, your marketing, your partnerships, all the things. And your brand story is how you got to where you are. It's how you climbed your mountains, right? Brand articulation is the sales and marketing copy that clearly defines really punchy ways who you are. And conveniently on a slide, that ends up being the headlines of these first 4 slides. So brand articulation is comprised of 4 pieces. It's the context, the pain, the solution, and the value proposition. So I usually use an analogy here where, let's say you're hiking in the wilderness and you have a rock in your shoe. I don't know if you live here.
Before,
it's happened before. Everyone's been there. And that's also part of what the context is meant to be. The context sets a world where they're doing exactly what you're doing.
They're nodding.
They're nodding. They go, okay, I've been there. I've had a rock in my shoe. That makes sense. The pain, there's some obvious pain. Primary pain, every time you step down, your foot hurts. But there's also secondary pain. There's tertiary, quaternary pain of you're distracted from the trail, so you might fall off a cliff. You are irritable, and so you're upset with your companions, and that's not good. You're distracted from the beauty around you. You're not appreciating what's going on, right? And if you're thinking about this in a business case, there's obvious pain, but there's going to be a ton more. The solution, part 3, is removing the rock from the shoe. It's just removing the pain. Again, something that people can go, obviously you want the pain to be gone. The value proposition is your patent pending pair of tweezers that you invented to take rocks out of hikers' shoes. And so this little, I like how you said a mini arc. The mini arc takes someone through the centering exercise of, this is the world we're swimming in. We are operating in cryptocurrency banking. And everyone goes, okay, I
generally
vaguely understand that playground. Okay. Talk to me. Okay, then there's pain there. Oh, okay. I know someone who's been through that pain, or I have been through that pain myself. I can empathize with that. And so you're kind of tuned in. By the time you get to the solution of you want the pain to be gone. It's like, well, yeah, I want the pain to be gone. Like, I'm bought into this. And then it's like, well, tell me, how'd you do it? And that's the value proposition. And from there, all the other slides fall into place. Then you're talking about, here's how it works. Here's even how we developed it, or some of our secret sauce deeper. Here's how long it takes to implement. All those sorts of granular nitty-gritty slides, they flow because the emotional hook is set.
And when I heard you say this the first time, one thing that jumped out at me was the difference between the value proposition and the solution, right? Is that the solution is what removes the pain, regardless of how that was done, right? It's just the pain is gone, right? So you almost open it up to the audience of, imagine that just magically the pain was gone. Wouldn't that be better, right? And who could disagree with that before you even started talking about what your specific solution is? But then it just naturally flows into, here's the specific value of how we achieve that solution. And then, like you said earlier, if they're hooked on that, then the rest of the presentation becomes way more meaningful because they've been on this little mini emotional journey where now they actually care about those details that you wanted to talk about right from the beginning.
That's exactly
And
right.
it's so interesting because, again, like coming from a technical background, like I always want to jump into my solution, right? Like this is why my solution is better than all the solutions. But without getting them emotionally invested, they just don't care. And it's a blunt way to put that, but it's true, right? Like cold outreach, they just don't care. They don't know you. They don't know your story. They know nothing about you. So why would they care about your specific solution?
Well, and to this point of they don't care, and you're bringing up cold messaging, in any situation, they don't care. When someone lands on your website, when you reach out to them over social media, when they land on your social media profile, at no point in there do you care unless you create opportunities to make them care.
Right.
Or invite them to care, right?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, we believe that sales is not about coercion. It is about finding good fit. And so if on a website you can clearly outline, hey, here's the context, here's the pain, and here's our solution, and take them on that emotional journey, if you can do that in your cold email, if you can do that in your LinkedIn cold DM, it's going to serve you better because you're improving your probabilities. You're just playing with your probabilities.
You can never guarantee it, right? But you're increasing the odds, or at least putting them in your favor.
Because it's more emotional, and you're looking for people who are going to resonate with that, and those are going to end up being better customers anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit more about how Deckability approaches. Let's say that I'm an entrepreneur. I just started a company. I understand that I have this need, but I've recognized that maybe this isn't my unique skill set. So I reach out to Deckability. I say, hey, what are the next steps? How might you direct a founder like myself? What would I do next?
So I mentioned about brand, and we subdivide brand into a few categories. And so our process takes someone through the different stages of brand.
Okay.
Our goal is to turn your company from founder-led to being brand-led.
Okay.
Where founder-led is great. There's a lot of heart in there. A lot of times there's a personal story. A lot of times people have a personal following they can rely on. But you always hit a stage in growth where you need to hire a sales team, you need to hire a customer service team, you need to have tendrils of influence going out.
And they don't have your story. Yeah.
And so that's what we focus on, is creating a brand that your team and your company can rally around, which then your customers and your investors can rally around.
Gotcha.
So that's brand writ large.
Okay.
Brand story first comes from, we do market and product downloads in terms, market, competition, and product downloads, where we're understanding who you are, where you sit in the marketplace, what everyone else is doing, what the expectation of everyone else is doing, because people will often say things that maybe they can't do, and vice versa.
Right.
We integrate any brand materials, so if you have a logo, if you have colors, then that's great. And then we are doing a design thinking workshop, deep dive, to really drill down into what it is you do. We have a double Venn diagram, and maybe I can send it to you. You can put on the video or something. But basically, there's two sides to this Venn diagram. On one side, you have a persona who has pain, and they're seeking an outcome.
Okay.
On the other side, you have you, which is a product that matches with that persona, a process that eases that pain, and a promise that matches the outcome that they're seeking. And the closer we can get those two to overlap and to fit, the better for you and the easier time you're going to have in the sales process.
Ideal diagram would basically be just one circle, right, where everything fits within
perfectly
that.
mapped.
Yes, exactly.
And so the deep dive is us coming in as corporate therapists to help an executive team rally around who are we, who do we serve, why do we serve them, and what exactly is the pain that we solve. We take that and we go from brand story into brand articulation, and we craft it into those 4 slides, really those 4 pieces of pain, context, pain, solution, and the value proposition. And then from there, we're creating the rest of the outline and the flow of which slides go where, timeline, implementation, how it works, and then we do visualization. So we will typically have an iteration cycle with the client where we will walk through a verbal story first.
Okay.
And then we'll do the visual side after, once we get a check off there, where we'll attach their brand, we'll do custom iconography, and try to minimize word count, especially for a deck, but convey the story in a meaningful and visual way.
Okay, that's fantastic. So what I heard there, and you can tell me if this is a accurate distillation or if I missed anything, but it sounds like you strip out anything that is not critical to the company image, right? So that might be, there might be aspects of your personal story that are important, but it doesn't necessarily build your brand in the direction that you need it to go, right? So you want to keep anything that is relevant, but strip out the things that aren't relevant specific to the brand. And then once you've stripped everything down, you basically build it back up to match with that persona of the target customer that you're going after, so that it's easy for them to see, hey, I have this problem. This is the obvious solution. And the brand fits with my problem. Is that accurate? I feel like I'm stumbling a little bit there, but
no, you're nailing it, and maybe it'll be more concrete if I can. I'll share a quick story. So we were meeting with this client. They're a healthcare data provider. They're come up with this brilliant way to essentially create proactive health messaging. So imagine from your doctor's office, you miss an appointment, you miss your medication, you get an empathetic, timely, and really personalized message that says, hey, you missed this thing, here's why you need to fix it, and helps you to move along. Helps the bottom line, helps insurance, helps all the things. Amazing product. The product is, the team behind it is a group of Gen X men, these big, beefy, masculine dudes. And so we're sitting around a table and we're going through this deep dive exercise, and we're pulling out all the pieces, especially about personality, about what kind of vibe they want to give off. And we got to the word masculine, and they said, well, yeah, of course we're, look at us, we're a masculine brand. And we stopped and said, well, typically, who's the one that the doctor's calling? Who's the one who's taking the kids in? It's like, it's the mom. And we had this whole conversation about like the maternal, the caretaking, and broadly speaking, feminine traits of the persona that they're trying to attract to their brand. And they had this moment of, we're a feminine brand. And it was so just not in their realm of comprehension, but it was absolutely what needed to happen. And the resulting brand was soft. And it was feminine, and it was really delightful, actually. Totally different color palette than they were expecting.
And it fit with the end user.
It was exactly what they needed. And they've had, honestly, roaring success. They've literally sold tens of millions of dollars worth of their product just basically from that change.
That's amazing. No, and that's a great example of what you do. And you strip out your own persona from it, right? To put in the correct persona that's needed to help launch you into success.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, maybe shifting gears a little bit now. Most founders, entrepreneurs, they struggle early on with their company. Has Deckability had any early struggles that you'd be willing to share?
We have had struggles of growth. So they've honestly all been good problems to have. We honestly feel pretty blessed in a lot of ways, where we felt like we found at the right time and just the right messaging in the marketplace and the right medium as well. And so a lot of our flow, our pipeline has come from me posting on LinkedIn, just basically putting stuff out into the void.
Which is great. Nice organic growth.
It's been great. We haven't done any outbound, which is really unusual. We've never had to, never really wanted to, because we've had
honestly, it sounds like you're fulfilling a need, right? And that your natural way of reaching out is where people are looking to try to fill that need.
I think so. There's been a lot of good fit there, and part of that is because I'm relying on the expertise of my co-founders, where one has started a $10 and $100 million business. The other has had several entrepreneurial ventures. They're 10 and 15 years my senior. And so I've been very blessed to ride some of their coattails that they've been able to see around corners.
Leverage some of that experience that they've had.
I think so. Yeah. I do think, though, that there's a lesson in here of when it works, it just kind of works, and it can just flow. And what I've seen from a lot of entrepreneurs that I've helped to coach is if something is really not working, there's probably a reason for it. And almost always it's because you haven't met pain yet. Because as soon as you're meeting pain, whether from actually meeting or being able to message about it, and hopefully both, people come through the door. People want to pay you money. And so I think that's what our experience has been, is we have found a genuine pain in the marketplace, and people are willing to pay for it. And so a lot of our problems have been problems of growth, where we've had to figure out what scaling looks like, and we've had to make decisions about who we want to be when we grow up and how we want to grow. And as we speak, haven't posted on LinkedIn for about 3 months because we needed to cut off our pipeline because we were overwhelmed.
Right.
Like we literally couldn't fulfill. And so we're in the process of hiring an operating team to try to manage.
Well, nobody loves problems, but this sounds like an excellent problem to be needing to struggle with at this point in time.
It's been stressful. Like I won't lie. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who've really been stressed out because they are making money, and that's a unique kind of stress. Yeah. But then there are a few folks that I've been able to have conversations with, and there's real stress of success, and there are plenty of companies that have been killed stone dead because of growth and because of scaling, and so it's not there's a Goldilocks zone in there somewhere where I think we're still trying to figure out what that is, because we were starting to slip on our quality and things weren't going as well. And we were just personally really stressed, pulling crazy hours. And so there's real stress at either end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's completely true, and I wish you the best of luck in overcoming this particular obstacle. But one thing that I did want to pull out of what you were saying just a little bit earlier was, you were talking about when you actually solve that pain, like people will let you know. And I think there's always challenges in entrepreneurship when it comes to growing and scaling. But you shouldn't be beating your head against the same rock forever, right? Like if you find yourself just like constantly outreaching and constantly trying to tweak your pitch and nobody is responding, and like you're spending the time, you're spending the money, you're spending you're doing everything right. I think what I heard you say there, and I don't want to misspeak, was that like maybe take a step back and understand that maybe you're not actually solving anybody's problem, and that you might need to pivot into something that is more aligned with that solution or that pain that somebody is feeling. Does that sound like an accurate restatement there?
I think that's insightful, especially because thinking back, this is an interesting exercise to think about because it's been almost 2 years now. So it's been a while. Relatively. Yeah. For my short life, it's been a while. But I think part of the leaning on the experience of my co-founders has been the speed of iteration, where we knew we had something because we had people just walk in the door and say, here, have some money. Please fix this for us.
Yeah. Painful enough that they were approaching you.
Exactly. Yes. But we had, in the beginning especially, we had no process. We didn't have emails. We didn't have a website. We didn't have a payments processor. We didn't have anything until like client 5 or 6. And we weren't, I would say, established as a brand until probably like our 12th client. Right. And I'd say that's pretty typical. And also just as much as I harp on brand, you got to just find people to pay money first. Yeah. Like worry about how you look and feel and present yourself in the marketplace after you know that it's something worthwhile. Right. But after every single client, we made it a point to have some sort of debrief meeting to say, okay, on our statement of work call, when we were doing our presentation, we have a deck. We need to update these 3 slides because of this thing that we heard from the customer. And we try it in the next iteration. And then we fixed a few more things. And so
it's basically just a postmortem on
postmortem always.
Just happened, yeah.
But to your point, we were never, ever beating our heads against the same rock. Right. We were always changing. And I think that's probably what led to the successes. We knew we had pain. Yeah. And we knew we were solving the pain, but honing in closer and closer and closer has just led it to almost feel, I hate to say it, but almost feel easy in some ways. Like we really do feel like we have nailed this part of our messaging and who we are, and people resonate with it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So maybe last question for you. You started out in statistics here at BYU, right? What advice would you give to your younger self, right? If you could talk to yourself going into college, would you recommend that they change their major? Do you feel like that was valuable? I don't know. What advice would you have for your younger self?
I think my advice to my younger self is would not be to not stress as much. I think I was so worried about what grades I was going to get, pretty perfectionistic in general, and I enjoyed school growing up, and good grades were always really important to me. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people here at BYU could relate to that.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah. And so I would say don't stress as much, and there's 2 reasons for it. The first is I learned the most the semesters that I got the worst grades. I learned the most from failure. I learned the most from actually trying to understand the material and maybe not doing as well on the test to be performative, but actually understanding what was happening. And 2, it just kind of doesn't matter after. Like, it's really important, I think, for the sake of doing something hard to work hard in school. But almost all my learning, almost all my growth has happened outside of it. And all the real world stuff, it just has such a bigger impact. And so I would just say not stress as much, like enjoy the process.
Now, the following question to that is, would your younger self take that advice? Because I agree with you completely. And I think I say, if I told my younger self that, I don't think I would take that advice, unfortunately, when I was younger. What do you think?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because you can only see what you can see. And your whole world is college, is class and grades and tests. And you don't really see anything outside of that. And now there's so many other things. So maybe not. Maybe it's just a product. But
you would still give that advice.
I'll still give the advice.
Yeah,
I'll still put it out there
and
hope that just a little bit less stress.
Well, and I think, you go through different stages in your life. And I 100% agree that that's exactly what my younger self should have heard, right? But again, a little skeptical of whether or not it would have been too hard-headed to actually take it.
Bless their heart.
Okay, any other parting thoughts that you have generally? Startup entrepreneurs, anything that you think they should know?
I'm reading a book right now called Anti-Fragile.
Very good book.
Love Nassim Taleb.
Yeah.
He's so good. I feel like my IQ increases by 2 points every time I read anything by him. But specifically, he calls out entrepreneurs, and he calls out the kind of craziness of going against the odds. Like, I'm a stats guy.
Yeah.
Stats are not good. They're not stacked in our favor for entrepreneurs.
Yes.
But the exercise itself is so valuable, not just for us individually, but for society at large. And so my parting thought is just go forth and conquer. And like, entrepreneurship rocks. And it's just it's a blast, and try to have as much fun as possible and soak in the learnings, because there are precious few instances or avenues that you can take in life where you're going to learn as much in such a short amount of time. So that's a blessing in my opinion.
Yeah, love it. We'll leave it at that. Well, thank you, John, for coming in. We really appreciate the time.